Hello ladies and gentlemen, hi guys and girls, and welcome to day 6 of the puzzle advent calendar. Wait a minute, advent calendar? Okay, I don't think that's the right one. Perfect, that's it. Alright, so first of all, the Puzzle Advent Calendar is a collaboration between lots of puzzle creators and video creators, and we're presenting 24 different puzzles, never before seen puzzles, through the month of December. And I think this year's lineup is pretty good, so make sure to check out the playlist of the Puzzle Advent Calendar 2020 and also subscribe to the next person, which is going to be DG Cubes, with a puzzle from CubeDad516. Finally we get to see one of his puzzles reviewed. So make sure to check out their channels, and I hope you enjoy the build video for my Christmas wreath. I started off by collecting all the materials that were needed for the build, such as candles, the wreath itself and the candle holders. To follow along with the Halfminx theme, I chose 2 Megaminxes, a Kilominx and a Pyraminx crystal as the base puzzles. The first of the 4 builds was the 1x1 Halfminx, so I took one of the Megaminxes and started de-stickering it completely. The general idea behind these 4 modifications was to remove the top layer on each of the puzzles and then hollowing out the rest so that the candle holder could fit into it. I decided to build the 1x1 Halfminx using a spare Megaminx as the base puzzle and just bandaging the pieces together. So I put lots of super glue into the puzzle and onto the core, and then used the sanding dust that I had collected over time to strengthen the bond and make it dry a little bit faster. Once the glue had hardened, I prepared the puzzle for the bandaging, so I took 120 grit sandpaper, wrapped it around my metal ruler and started sanding all of the outer surfaces. Since there is always a small space between the individual pieces, I decided to use my Dremel equipped with a milling bit to make these grooves bigger so that I could fill them up later. It was a bit tricky to find the best hand positioning to do that, but once I got it figured out, it was really satisfying to look at. I mixed up some epoxy sculpt, that's the material I usually use to fill up puzzle pieces, and pressed it into the grooves that I had sanded down before. It does look a bit weird now, but that will change pretty quickly, as the next step was to sand down all of the excess material with 40 grit sandpaper. Doing this all by hand is probably not the fastest way, but when I use the metal ruler and sandpaper for sanding, I just always get an aesthetically pleasing result in my opinion. Now we have to fit the candle holder inside it, and that's easier said than done. In total, I used 3 different sanding bits in my Dremel to sand down the plastic that was in my way. The smaller ones were used to sand down parts of the core, and the bigger one was used to widen the hole for the candle holder. I then had to round off all of the sharp edges and corners of the puzzle, so I took a big nail file and some smooth sanding paper and sanded the whole outer shell of the puzzle smooth. I spray painted everything with matte black paint and put the candle holder in place to further reveal what the puzzle will look like when it's done. So far so good, let's move on to the Kilominx now. I started out by repeating the first steps that I did on the previous puzzle, so I de-stickered it and unscrewed one screw to remove the entire top layer. The 5 inner edges and 5 center pieces that have been made visible this way will have to be glued together to create the mechanism for this 2x2 Halfminx. So it was time for more super glue and sanding dust to bond these pieces together so that they would form a ring. I used a big sanding bit on my Dremel to remove parts of the core and widen the hole for the candle holder. But as it turned out, I could not sand deep enough into the puzzle to sink the candle holder fully into it, so I had to improvise. I thought I could create rings of 1 mm thick plastic sheet to elevate the top surface of the puzzle to gain some more room to work with. And that's the method that I chose to go with in the end. In total, I glued 4 of those rings onto each other and then onto the puzzle to give me the elevation needed to fit the candle holder in there perfectly. Everything worked, but sadly this design didn't fit the aesthetics that I was going for, so I decided to bring everything into shape a little bit more with my disc sander. Now it was time to just clean everything up a bit more, so I filled in all of the gaps with epoxy sculpt, sanded everything smooth, and then assembled and spray painted the puzzle. Let's move on to the 3x3 Halfminx now. The Megaminx is the most commonly used base puzzle to create a Halfminx, and I also feel like this version was the most straightforward one to build. Just like for the other two puzzles, I had to remove the top layer and glue the 5 center and edge pieces together. You know the drill by now. Super glue, then sanding dust to strengthen the bond between the pieces. I then took the big bandaged piece I had just created and started widening the ridges with the milling bit on my Dremel tool. Again, this is just to be able to fill in the ridges better, as the epoxy sculpt has a stronger bond when it has a bigger surface area to connect. So I mixed up equal amounts of the two parts and started filling up all of the hollow parts of this core piece. To sand down the excess material, I used 40 grit sandpaper, and to round the pieces off, I took the nail file and some smooth sandpaper to get the same finish as on the 1x1 Halfminx. Now that the basic modification of the puzzle was done, it was time to fit the candle holder into it. So again, I went in there with the big sanding bit and removed enough material so that the candle holder would fit snugly into the puzzle. 3 out of 4 done. Now it's time to address this monster here. The Pyraminx crystal also uses a Megaminx mechanism, but all of the edge pieces are floating. That means that they are not connected to the main mechanism, but rather are just sitting between two corner pieces. I removed the top layer of the puzzle and was greeted with the most difficult problem of the whole build. Alright, so after building 3 of the 4 puzzles, I think I've reached the crux of this build, which is the master Pyraminx, especially the part where I have to figure out how to make these floating edges stay in place during the turns. As you can see, I took 2 corner pieces and the edge piece from the mechanism and put a rubber band around it. And now I will glue these 2 corner parts together, because these corners consist of 3 parts. Basically the mechanism part, then there is another inside part, and then the outer shell. And I only want to use the outer shell, but I have to get these pieces to fit perfectly together. So basically I would glue 2 of the outer corners together and then move the rubber band over one spot and attach the next corner to it. Rinse and repeat. This way I was able to create a piece that would allow the floating edges to stay in place during the turns. I equipped the Dremel with a cutting disc and removed as much material of this new part as possible, while still maintaining some sort of structural strength. The resulting crown piece looked pretty weird, but once I had fixed it into place with epoxy sculpt, I could see that it was doing its job pretty well. Here you can see the floating edges moving under the crown, so I would have to be very careful when filling the puzzle, as I could easily bond the mechanism together by accident. Small pieces of plastic sheet were glued into the puzzle before filling it, so that these moving edge pieces were covered. I widened the hole with the big sanding bit and created a small ring out of plastic sheet that I could fit into the puzzle, so that the candle holder would have a flat surface to sit on. I then used 120 and 180 grit sandpaper to round off all of the sharp edges of the puzzle and to smoothen the surfaces out a bit more. Alright, so the 4 puzzles are done now, except for one thing. I still have to glue in all of these candle holders. And for that I will just make a small and thin roll of epoxy sculpt, wrap it around the bottom of these candle holders, and then just press them in place and put a little bit of weight on them until everything has hardened. Here you can see one of the candle holders with the epoxy sculpt wrapped around it that I just had to mount to the puzzle now. And as you can see, it worked out just well with the candle holders firmly in place. After another coat of spray paint to even everything out a little bit further, the puzzles were finally ready to be stickered. I decided to choose colors that would represent each season of the year, starting off with the 1x1 Halfminx representing spring, the 2x2 Halfminx representing summer, and so on. I would love to know if you see any similarities between the colors I chose and the season that is supposed to represent, or if I should have just gone for a standard color scheme. To create the sticker template, I used the original stickers as guidelines and replicated them in a CAD program. Only 3 new templates had to be made this way, 2 for the 1x1 Halfminx and 1 for the bandaged piece on the Megaminx version. The stickers were machine cut from Chewy's custom stickers based in the US. And if it wasn't for the fast processing time of my order there, the stickers would have never arrived in time. So a big thank you goes out to Chewy for cutting the stickers and shipping them out within 24 hours, so that they would arrive just in time on the 3rd of December. Now that all of the puzzles are stickered, we can start assembling the Christmas wreath itself. I took the golden candle holders and pressed them into the Christmas wreath, making sure that they were symmetrical and evenly spread. Usually you would place the candle on there, but we will just be placing our puzzles onto them. I also made sure to cut down all of the bits that were sticking out to make everything look a bit cleaner, before decorating it further with large cones. For the final touches, we just have to place the 4 puzzles onto the wreath and put the candles into the puzzles. I had bought LED candles and real candles, but decided to use the LED ones, so that these freshly crafted puzzles would not get ruined straight away. Nathan. And with that, the assembly is done and the puzzle for day 6 of the advent calendar is finished, the Halfminx Christmas wreath. So here we have the 4 puzzles now, and we only have to learn how to properly use the Christmas wreath. So in Austria it's a tradition that on the first Advent Sunday we light the first candle of our Christmas wreath. So today is the 6th of December, so usually I would just turn this candle on, but the puzzles are unscrambled. So for the first day, the first Advent Sunday, you don't get to solve a puzzle, you only get to build up the Christmas wreath and light this one candle. Then, on the second Advent Sunday, you take this scrambled Pyraminx and solve it, and once it's solved, you can light up the candle. So now I will scramble all of these puzzles, and then for the celebration of the 6th of December I will solve the Pyraminx and light up the candle. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed my first contribution to the Puzzle Advent Calendar 2020. And don't forget to check out tomorrow's video on DG Cube's channel. It's linked in the description. And you should also check out the playlist linked in the description below. Have a nice day.